Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about building and developing your team quotient. You know, there's a lot of talk about developing teams. How do you do it though? You know, I've invited a guest on today, Douglas Gerber, who has an extensive background in building top performing teams. In fact, he is the former vice president of PepsiCo, Greater China. And we're excited to have him here. And a shout out to Rob Nissen from Nissen PR, who made the introduction. Thank you, Rob. I get such great guests referred to me by booking agents, and Rob is no different. He's always sent me amazing, amazing guests. So thank you to him, and welcome to Leaders of Transformation, Douglas. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and happy to see you again, Nicole, and thank you to Rob.
Yes, absolutely. Now, before we get started, I also want to do two things. First of all, I want to welcome you as the listener, and if you're watching the video as the viewer, because you know what? You're the reason why we do this podcast. We do this podcast because I love talking to great, amazing people like Douglas. Where else do you get to have these kind of conversations? But also I love to record them so that I can share them with you so that it can inspire you and equip you with what you need in order to be the leader of transformation that you're capable of being. And so I encourage you afterwards, go check out, I know Douglas has a website, you can check out his website. Also go to leadersoftransformation.com and let us know what you think. You know, if you have questions, you have comments, we want to hear them. You can also find us on social media as well. And if you like this episode, leave us a rating or review on iTunes. It gives us an opportunity to reach a wider audience. And we have listeners in 120 countries, and we want to continue to extend that out so we can inspire the difference makers and the world changers all around the world. So with that, the second thing I want to do is I want to promote this book. This is a book that I had the opportunity to co-author. It's called Power Up Superwomen, and it is stories of courage and empowerment. There's some amazing stories in here of women that have overcome a great trial and tragedy and have actually learned such great lessons that they share in the book. And it's to encourage you as women that you can overcome the challenges in your life and move forward and build a great life. So I would encourage you to get a copy of that. You can go to leadersoftransformation.com/resources. And so let's get back to Douglas. I mentioned that he was the vice president of PepsiCo Greater China. He actually has an extensive background as you know in building teams through that, and some of the things that he's done. He actually, I'll give you a little bit more background here. He is a IAF, International Association of Facilitators, and Certified Professional Facilitator, and ICF, Certified Professional Coach. He has a master's degree in international management from Thunderbird School of Global Management and is a graduate of the Penn State Executive Program. He's lived in 10 countries and speaks 8 languages. We're going to speak English today because that's pretty much the only one that I'm fluent in, but we're going to have a great time. He also wrote a book, which I would recommend afterwards getting a copy of. It is called Team Quotient: How to Build High Performance Leadership Teams that Win Every Time. And yes, for those of you that are watching, you're seeing the copy of it. Douglas is sharing it. And so it's an excellent book. I've been through it. There is a lot of case studies and a lot that will back up what we're talking about here today. So make sure you go and get a copy of that. I know it's on Amazon. It's also on Douglas's website, douglasgerber.com. Okay, so Douglas, let's dive in. We're talking about Team Quotient. What is Team Quotient? I mean, we've heard of IQ, we've heard of EQ, now we've got TQ. What is it?
TQ is essentially Team Quotient. It's the ability to measure a team. And, you know, when you're talking about building a team, actually, if you can't measure the team, you don't really know how you're doing. So you mentioned IQ, EQ. So we're moving from IQ to EQ and now to TQ, or Team Quotient. So we felt this was so important to be able to measure a team that we actually trademarked that in 4 continents, including North America. So essentially that's what TQ is. And so Team Quotient, or TQ, is a tool that leaders and teams can use actually to take their team from wherever they are now. They may be a dysfunctional team, they may be a good team, to high performance. The goal is high performance. And that's what we're striving for.
So what is, when you say high performance, let's actually define what that is, in terms of, are we strictly talking about results? What are some of the other qualities of a high performance team?
Great question, Nicole. And actually, high performance is certainly, results is a part of that, because if you don't have great results, you're not a high performance team. But there's actually, what we did is, over the last 10 years, we studied 108 leadership teams to find out what constitutes high performance. And we came up with 10 most important factors. Things like results focus orientation, vision, values, collaboration, trust, fun, having a sense of fun, effectiveness, having really good meetings, alignment. So, you know, those are some of the things that are so important. And if you can score well and do well on all of those things, you will become a high performance team.
So I love what you said there about measuring, because there's a lot of businesses. Being a business coach myself, I've actually gone into small businesses and, you know, and done business performance assessments. And it's funny, because if you ask the leader how they're doing, they'll say, I'm great. I'm a great leader. Then you go talk to their team and they'll say, actually, not so much. And you hear all of the things that are going on behind the scenes. And so if you don't actually get a whole, you know, full picture of it, you can't help the team grow. And so it starts at the leadership level now. So when you talk about Team Quotient, I know in your book, you also talk about the ability to lead effectively. So can you unpack that a little bit in terms of, you know, so am I looking at how effectively I work within the team, or am I looking at it from a standpoint of the leader being able to lead the team?
Yeah, great question, Nicole. And actually, I have a saying that I've you know, come to after all these years, and that is that leaders are only as good as the teams they build. So in other words, you may be a great visionary, great at strategy, you know, be really good at motivating people. But if you can't lead a team and you can't build a team, you're really not a great leader. So, so it really starts with the leader and their leader's realization that, hey, for me to be successful and for the organization to be successful, we have to build a great team. There's no way around that. So when we do Team Quotient, you know, it's an online confidential survey. Takes less than 10 minutes. Every team member takes it. And then we come up with an aggregate score. And that score is the Team Quotient. Just like IQ, you have an intelligence quotient. You have a score. Same thing with TQ. And it's from 10 to 50. So 40 to 50 is high performance. 10 to 20 is dysfunctional. So you get a score, and you also get diagnostics around those 10 things that I spoke about. And then it's the leader's imperative actually to work on those things. You know, work on making sure you have a really robust vision. Work to make sure that your values and your behaviors are clearly aligned among the team. And through that process, and by the way, this is a process that takes time. It takes between 1 to 3 years. This is not an overnight fix. But through that process, the team will go to high performance. And then you measure it after 6 months, and you measure it again after 6 months until you finally get to high performance. It's very aspirational. So in other words, if you say, oh, we're 30, we're just a mediocre team, are you happy with that? No, people aren't happy with that. They want to move to high performance. You know, that's the nature of teams. They always want to be the best.
I love what you said there about it taking time. Because in this world nowadays, everybody's looking for instant. Put it in the microwave, pull it out in 2 minutes, my dinner's done. Well, and the same thing, you know, happens in organizational consulting. You know, you go into companies and a lot of times they're like, okay, let's do an offsite and we're going to get our team all calibrated. And then, and I know you talk about offsites in your book as part of the process. You know, can you talk a little bit more about, and maybe use some examples? I know you have tons of examples in the book. Also, you know, working at PepsiCo, you know, you have examples there of how long it actually takes to make the shift. And, you know, because it said a lot of times it's like leaders, they'll say, you know what, we'll do this thing, we'll check off the box, or the HR person says we need to have a leadership development or a team building of exercise. Done and done. We're done for this year, and next year we'll be back and we'll do it again. And then they
Yeah.
wonder why they don't create
Nothing changes.
transformation.
Nothing happens.
Nothing changes. And people go, oh,
Right.
if it's
Yeah.
done, okay, well, I can carry on and
Yeah.
do the same thing I've always done.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Because you might go on a beautiful ropes course or a nature trail. You have a great time. You go back to the office, nothing changes. And so that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about classic team building here. We're talking about team transformation, which does take 1 to 3 years. And so that's a process, and we really boil it down to 2 major steps. The first step is transformation. The second is integration back in the workplace. So in transformation, first thing we need to do is the TQ, understand where we are. And we do interviews with team members to understand where their heads are and where their minds are. And then we'll actually get the team together for a 1 to 2 day offsite. And this is where actually the transformation starts to take place. And you work on those things that you've identified. It might be vision. It might be to say, hey, we have some issues we have to handle. We need to figure out how we're going to have effective meetings. We need to create some cohesion here within the team. So you work on those things that you've identified, and it's a minimum of a day, but best to have 2 days. So with 2 days, there's some real tangible, palpable transformation that takes place. Then you go back and you go into phase 2, which is integration. And integration says, when we go back in the workplace, we actually have agreed on behaviors, and how are we doing on those behaviors? So we actually monitor those behaviors as well. The team rates itself on their behaviors. Why are behaviors so important? Because the only thing you can see are behaviors. You can talk about values, you can talk about ideas, but the only thing that you can see are behaviors and that's what's demonstratable. So this is why we look at behaviors, we measure those behaviors as well. And then going back, and then within every 3 months, the team starts to calibrate and say, how are we doing? Are we falling off here? Or, are we staying on track? Are we creating momentum? Then we'd say 6 months later, get together again for a day or 2 days on an offsite environment, if possible, and then take the team deeper, right? And then within a year, 2 years, or maybe 3, the team's going to go to high performance. So that's the type of journey it is. And this is a journey that's very aspirational. Teams love it. There's nothing like being in a great team. Sports teams are good examples. If you're ever on a championship sports team, you'll know that there's no experience, no feeling like that. Same thing with business teams. But unfortunately, only 5% of business teams are high performance teams.
Yeah, which is a small percentage considering all of the effort, supposedly the effort that goes into building teams and leaders, especially right now. There's so much talk about it. Now, when you were at PepsiCo, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced, and how were you able to apply this in that situation? I know some of that, I don't know if you can talk about.
Well, I think that one of the most common challenges, and this is what I call the default position of any team, and that's silo mentality. So silo mentality is essentially, I come to the table, you come to the table, Jack comes to the table, John comes to the table, Joan comes to the table, in a silo mentality. In other words, represent my department, represent myself. I want to win, okay?
Right.
That's the default nature of teams, most teams today. And it's the default nature because it's the natural thing to do. So and when I was in PepsiCo, I found this, we were a team of great talent, this huge talent around the table, but we weren't a talented team. Moving from a silo mentality then to actually team first mentality is what you want to do. And that takes work. That's where the process where you've got to get together and figure these things out. You've got to figure out, what's important to us, what are our values, what are our behaviors, and all those things we've been talking about, in an offsite environment. Because if you don't do that work, it will always be silo mentality, because that's the nature of, people. People will, by default, always think about number one. It takes a lot of consciousness and work to think about, the team and put the team first. Now, this is very interesting, Nicole, that what I've found is that there's a shift that happens from moving from silo to team first. There's that shift, and you can feel that shift. When a team really says, oh yeah, let's put each other first. And I had a case I was working with, it was actually a French bank. And, one of the managers just had this moment, and he says, I realize I've been putting myself first the whole time, and I've got to put the team first, you know. And it was just one of those moments that shifted the whole team. That's what we're looking for when we're working with teams, is that moment. And, you know, as a leader, when you experience that moment, you know, it's an epiphany, because you say, you know, this is something that I've been working towards. And then once people feel that, then there's this whole sense of fulfillment that takes place, and a sense of drive. You know, I want to do the best for the team, not just, you know, to show off, or not just for myself or my department. I want to do the best for the team. Very nice. Well, and that is, it's interesting that you say that, because I oftentimes will talk about a team is not, there's a big difference between a team and a whole group of individuals working under the same roof. And that's exactly what you're describing here. Now, it's important to have the right people on the team. And when you're going through this process, I'm sure there's some measure of attrition, people that don't want to be part of a team, that they don't want to change and be part of that transformation. How do you identify them? What's the process of that? I know some leaders are, you know, really have a hard time with releasing people. Other leaders are quick to do it, almost too quick to do it, and they judge their people for not jumping on board quicker because they move fast. They assume everybody else is going to move fast. Can you talk a little bit about the balance between that and what's the right approach? You know, that is something that's so important, actually. If you look at, is everybody in the team, do they want to take this journey together? And often you'll find one or two people who just don't. And I had a case, I was working with a global headhunting company, and one of the top leaders, she represented 30% of the firm, you know, just her billings. So, you know, she was a superstar. She was phenomenal. But she was really very much into her silo mentality and kind of working in her little boutique within the organization. And it became clear that she just wasn't, she was in it for herself. She wasn't interested in the team. She started to feel uncomfortable. And people said, you know, it's really important that we all get our heads together here. And she said, okay, well, ultimately, I'm going to leave. And so this is a natural thing that will happen. You know, people will feel that they're uncomfortable. You know, peer pressure is so strong. You know, it's such a powerful thing. People will naturally just leave. So usually there's this attrition that would take place naturally. And you know, I would say that if I've worked, you know, let's say in 100 teams, there might be 20 teams where you're going to lose somebody because of, you know, that type of factor. But it's something that you have to go through, and you have to be very honest about it. And I would think that you have to be so committed to the mission and committed to the transformation that you're willing to, even if a top performer who's representing a huge portion of your business leaves, knowing that the outcome afterwards is going to be far greater than anything that you may have lost. I guess that's right. So it's that mission, that vision. How do you instill a mission and a vision so strongly in your team that they're willing to do what it takes and maybe get uncomfortable? Well, and before I go into that, actually, the point you make is very important, because people were worried. You know, I was mentioning this lady represented 30% of the billings. Said, well, she leaves, our business is going to collapse. What was really interesting, what happened was that within 6 months, they had picked up all the pieces and got the business back. And then the business started to actually move forward very, very nicely. So usually that's what happens. So your question is really about vision and mission. So one of the things that I found is that, you know, as a business, or maybe as an NGO, or maybe whatever type of organization, you've got to figure out, do you want to focus on your vision, your mission, or your purpose? Or two of the three. You know, most business teams are going to be more focused on vision. You know, where am I going in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time? What I find though is that, for example, some pharmaceutical teams or some mission critical teams, you know, hospitals, you know, sort of group of doctors, they're more interested in mission. And so it really just depends on what organization. But let's say you're a business team and you're concerned about vision. you need to break that vision down into, let's say, 3 or 4 parts, and work on each of those parts, and then bring it back together into an overall vision. So, that's actually step one, is the vision. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because if you don't have the vision, if you don't have a proper vision, it's very hard to motivate the team going forward. So we always say, get your vision right first, then move on to the other things. And if you get the vision right, you will actually have you've made some significant progress, and that in and of itself will be, like a shot in the arm to the team.
Now, you mentioned the difference between the 3, right? So the purpose, the mission, and the vision. Can you talk briefly about that? Because I know those words are very interchangeable these days. I noticed there's a lot of just throwing mission, vision, purpose, all the same thing. It's not. So can you talk just briefly about that?
Sure. The purpose is, a lot of times people, I'll go back to some pharmaceutical examples, because I work with a lot of pharmaceuticals, and for their people are very purpose driven. In other words, I'm here to save lives. That might be one of my, I'm working for this company because I believe, in the drugs, and I'm here to save lives. Yes. So, pharma might get a lot of bad press, but my experience is that people actually who work for pharmaceutical companies are very committed. They're very purpose driven.
Yes.
So, with a pharmaceutical type of company, you're probably going to spend a lot of energy on purpose, because that's what's going to motivate teams, and that's what's going to motivate people. And if it's mission critical, something that, you're here, for example, you're an airline, so you're mission critical, or you have a task force. Sometimes we have project teams. They're only around for 2 years. For them, mission's the most important thing. We've got to deliver on this mission, right? And as I said, business teams are usually more about vision.
Nice. Now, in your book, you also talk about the burning platform and the use of that in motivating teams. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love that one, because I got that from PepsiCo. We used to, in PepsiCo, talk a lot about burning platforms, and we're saying, okay, what's the burning platform here? Where's our house on fire? And if you can't get to the burning platform, it's pretty hard to really build a team effectively or transform a team. So every team, every leader, and every team needs to figure out, what is that burning platform? Burning platform might be that, look, if we don't come together as a team, our competitors are going to beat us to the punch. Right? It might be that his results aren't very good. We've got to come together to turn around results. It might be we've got some morale issues on the team or in the organization. So whatever it is, find the burning platform. The burning platform is essentially that thing or those things which will motivate you to do something differently. The idea of burning platform, let me just back up, because many people would have remembered it actually came from a platform, an oil platform that was burning, right? And people had to jump off, right, in order to survive. So that concept applied to business says that, there are some things that if we don't handle, our business will burn. It will crash and burn. And so this is what every leader and every team needs to find. And I devote actually a whole chapter to this. And the reason is that if you don't find this, Nicole, you will go back and you'll be lulled back into this false sense of sort of satisfaction, complacency. And that's not the place you want to be to build a high-performance team.
Mm-hmm. And in that, what I'm also hearing and reading the chapter, it's not necessarily just from a fear-based standpoint. It's the burning platform of, if we don't do this, our competition might, like I know in your case, you use the example of, okay, so Coca-Cola has a greater reach, bigger market share than you did at one point in China. So, okay, how do we change that? So it's also about the growth. It's about the possibility, the opportunity that goes along with it. Because if you have too much fear, then people are afraid, and that's not a constructive place to be. That's not a creative, innovative, safe space to be. It may be out of necessity, but it's not. So how do you balance that sort of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's actually negative burning platforms and there's positive burning platforms, in terms of, so negative ones we talked about, the house is on fire. The positive one says, look, if we don't come together as a team, we will not realize our potential. Yes. Or the potential in the market. Yes. Or we will have an experience that is suboptimal. We will not be able to really be fulfilled in our team and in our work. So that's the positive part of a burning platform. So as a leader, I always say it's good to have a negative and a positive. So the negative being, we've got to handle this. The positive saying, this is aspirational. We've got to do this. We only have a limited window, and this is what all leaders understand. There's only a limited window to do what you want to do, so you've got to maximize that.
Yeah, this has been great. Oh my goodness, there's so much that we could talk about. I encourage our listeners and our viewers to go get a copy of Douglas's book, Team Quotient. Now, before we wrap up, what even just, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but for you, what's your vision, like as you look forward and you see the impact that you're able to make through your company and what you're doing going into companies? What's the vision of what would you like to see 5-10 years down the road, or 2 years down the road?
Yeah, I think that the whole education system, executive education, MBAs, has been focused on individual capability, intelligence, right? So, my mission is actually to resource teams so that organizations can learn the power of effective teams. And if they can understand that, they'll be so much more effective than just focusing on the leaders alone. And so, I've seen the power of that. And what goes hand in hand with that is that as leaders within the team, you actually can find fulfillment. And so, that's another part of what I want to do is to give people the opportunity to say, here I am with this group of wonderful people, that this is an experience that's so fulfilling. So my work, my work may be tough. It may be full of challenges, but I'm working in, the A team, and I'm so excited about that. So that's also my sense of my mission is people personally, for that sense of fulfillment, and for organizations to really maximize that sense of team. And the other thing I just wanted to say for leaders, we're talking about the process 1 to 3 years. We're talking about, it sounds a bit daunting. But actually, if you just take one of the 10 things that we're talking about in the book, or Team Quotient, and just work on that, you're going to find immense benefit in your team. Then go on to the next one. So in other words, you don't have to do all 10 at one time. You can go step by step. And a lot of times teams say, hey, I want to take a slower approach. I just want to do a few things really well. That's fine. That's great. Or you can take the turbocharged approach and say, okay, I want to do 5 things really well right now. So it really just depends on the leader and the team and where they want to go.
Yeah, it's a great point what you just said there at the end. It depends on the leader and the team and where they want to go. And is everybody else on board? Because the leader could be saying, let's do 5 things, let's do 10 things. And the team is only ready to do 1 or 2. And you'd be better off working on the 1 or 2 and get those done, as opposed to trying to do more and not achieving anything, or actually going backwards. Yeah.
And you bring up a great point, because leaders can't sort of shove this down people's throats. It has to be aligned. In other words, everybody has to come along board, and so that's the great thing about it is. But once people are on board, then the leader can actually step back a little bit and say, "Hey, there's some momentum." I like to use the analogy of, instead of leaders having to push their teams and push their people, leaders can step back and the teams start to pull themselves up. They pull themselves up very naturally. So that's a difference in energy, and that actually starts to happen.
Yeah. This has been great, Douglas. Thank you so much for spending some time and sharing. I mean, this is one of those conversations that people are going to want to re-listen to. I know even for myself, is to listen to and re-listen to, because you provided so many nuggets that each one of those things can be unpacked extensively, which you do in your book. So this has been a great highlight of what's in your book, Team Quotient. I know it's extensive. It's 350 pages plus of really great value. So thanks for sharing some of it with us here today. We really appreciate you being here.
And thank you, Nicole. It's been a pleasure being on Leaders of Transformation. And I think what you're doing is actually a great thing as well, sharing all this wisdom from so many people to all of your listeners.
Yeah, well, my goal with it is, truly to inspire people to be the difference maker, the world changer that they're capable of being, whether that is that they own their own business or NGO or they work within a company. I believe that everybody is capable of being that transformational leader, even just the way they show up on teams like what you're describing here. Leadership happens at all levels. And so if we can encourage that, inspire that. And the idea of businesses becoming, we spend so much of our time in the marketplace, of our lifetime in the marketplace, to be able to have it to be a place that people can enjoy, like you said, be fulfilled. And I think there's also that sense of belonging that people are looking for, that they belong. Yeah. Who doesn't like belonging to a winning team?
Absolutely.
And, so that's the vision is if I can bring people like yourself who know how to do this, so we can start to create transformation in the marketplace, the rest of the ripple effect from that will be extraordinary into the other arenas, because ultimately we're all in the marketplace at some level. Even if somebody's unemployed, they're affected by what happens in the marketplace.
Right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you also to our listeners for being here and our viewers. We appreciate you and love to hear your comments, your questions. Certainly go to douglasgerber.com and get a copy of his book, Team Quotient. I'm sure it's on Amazon as well. It is excellent. As well, as I said, if you like this episode, go on iTunes and leave us a rating and review. And please share this. If you're, maybe you're in a community and you know a bunch of leaders and you're hearing people tell stories of, frustration, things that are not working within their team, share this episode with them so they can get a taste of the solution, what can help them to move forward and create transformation in their business. I highly encourage that. So again, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.